To download the software we're going to use for this course, so let's go to our browser and search for Microsoft SQL Server 2025. So we have to be careful of what we're the link we are going to click on, because sometimes there are some links that takes you to a third-party website. That's not what we are looking for. So we're actually looking to get onto Microsoft website. So, and click on Microsoft SQL Server download. So when we get to this site, we have a lot of options available for us. There's SQL Server 2025 on-premise, SQL Server on Azure, SQL Server 2025 Developer, and SQL Server 2025 Express. For us, we could download SQL Server 2025 Express or SQL Server 2025 Developer. So it's better we go with the developer option, because that is very good when it comes to trying to learn SQL Server, because it's give us exactly or almost what we will get when we go to the SQL Server Enterprise. So let's click on download SQL Server 2025 Developer. So click on the download Enterprise Developer Edition. So once the downloading is done, so click on open file. So right now it will tell us to select an installation type. So there is option for basic, custom, or download media. It's okay to click on basic. You could click on custom if you would like to change where the installation goes to, but sometimes that's depending on your choice. But right now we click on basic and then click on this accept button. So right now it's going to tell you where the installation is going to be located. So it's under our save file, program files, and Microsoft Server. That is fine for me. Click on install. So the installation is complete and we have an instance, like there's a default instance that's given to us. So the instance name is the MS SQL Server, and this is the connection string. And also there's an administrator, the name of my computer followed by my name, and also the SQL engine, the folder, and the version. So we have other options below, so we can connect to the instance it has given us now or customize this. Also, if we need to interact with the instance, we need a SQL Server Management Studio. So there's an option to install, or we can close this entirely. So it is best we close this entirely and then we can do proper installation by ourselves. So let's close this, and it will ask us if we are sure we want to exit. So I'll click on yes. And now let's go to our search bar and search for SQL. So once we search for SQL, we'll see different options, the SQL Server 2025 error and usage reporting and other ones. So what we actually need is the SQL Server 2025 installation center. So click on that. And then we'll have this installation center. So the first thing is that under the planning, there are options of hardware and software requirement and everything like that. So we don't need that. So the next thing we'll go to is installation, because we need to install an instance of SQL Server. So the first option on installation is new SQL Server standalone installation or add feature to an existing installation. So for people that are on SQL Server 2022, if you click on this option, it will recognize the SQL Server instances you have on your system already. So you don't need to create a new instance, or at that point you can add a new instance. But for people that are just installing this, so once you click on that new SQL Server standalone installation, it's going to ask you to browse for the installation media. So under your option, so it will default to this PC. So just click on down. So when you click on the drop down arrow, so click on this again, and you should see something like the SQL Server 2025 folder under this. So click on the drop down arrow again and just select the entdev_nup and click OK. Once you click that, so it will come up with this dialog box and try to run some checkup, and after that again it will bring you to this Microsoft update. So it's asking you Microsoft update offers security and other important update for Windows and other Microsoft software, including SQL Server. So it's asking, do you want this? And I can click on this. So automatically, if there's an update for SQL Server, you always get a notification. So let's click on next. So once it gets to this point, you should have the same thing I have on my screen. So the Windows firewall is always going to bring up a warning, so just ignore that and then click on next. If there's a problem, it's going to notify you. So probably some things you need to do. So ensure that the status is passed and every other requirement is also passed. So click on next. So once we get to this point, we have two options. Is either we perform a new installation of SQL Server 2025 or add feature to an existing instance of SQL Server 2025. So initially when we do the installation, there was a default instance that came with it, which is the MS SQL Server. So this is it right now. So if we click on add feature to it, so we can select that server and then click on next. So if there's anything we would like to add to it, then we do that. But for now, we want to perform a new installation. So that is the option we'll be selecting and click on next. Right now we'll be shown this. So we are on the developer edition, we are on the enterprise developer edition, and we don't need to enter a product key because that is for developer. So the next thing is just select this next button and accept the license. Click on next. So right now we don't need Azure extension for SQL Server. So untick this and then click on next. So for our instances right now that we want to create, so we want to create a database engine services. You select that. Also, under database engine services, there are other options that we could select, like SQL Server replication, AI service and language extension, full text and semantic extraction for search, polybase query services for external database, and analysis services. Also, shared features as integration services, scale out master and scale out worker. So all those things, they have their functions when it comes to the SQL Server. So for now, for the purpose of this course, what we need is just select this AI service and language extension and select this full text semantic extraction for services, and still ensure that database engine services is selected. So these two options that we selected under the database engine services are things that will work together with the database engine services. So right now we don't need integration service because that is not what this course is all about. So integration services is usually for something that is related to ETL, from extracting data from a source, transforming it and loading it into a destination. So select next. So once we get to this place right now, it's going to ask us to name our instance. So the instance that we see here is an already existing one on the server, the default one that was created for us. So right now I'm going to name the instance we are trying to create. So I could say Yusuf 2026, and pay attention when I click on instance ID, see what happens. So it automatically brings that name instance into the instance ID, and we have a SQL Server directory right now, which is just where the SQL Server was installed, and then my instance was attached to the end of the name. And the next thing is just click on the next button. So right now it's going to show us our configuration for the instances that we have just created, and we can see the services, and we have SQL Server agent, which is part of the services. We didn't select that, it's just a default selection for us. So what we selected was the SQL Server database engine and the SQL Server full text filter and all those on SQL Server browser. So all those on came as a default installation, and we have the ones that were selected. Right now there's no password attached to them, and the startup type, some of them are automatic, some of them are manual. So the SQL Server agent is always on manual. So when we start up our SQL Server Management Studio, if we need to use SQL Server agent, we need to start that manually. Another important stuff is that we need to click on this grant perform volume maintenance tax privilege to SQL Server database engine. So this is important to the performance of our SQL Server instance. Let's click on next. At this point now, we need to configure the database engine, which is the server configuration, which is the authentication mode. We have two types of authentication mode. There's window authentication mode and there's mixed mode. So the mixed mode, we use SQL Server authentication and window authentication. So the best option for us is to select the mixed mode. So sometimes if you select window authentication mode, it will only use your Windows account to log into the SQL Server. So if you are using another application that doesn't recognize the Windows authentication mode, then you won't be able to access your SQL Server. So the mixed mode will give us a system administration account, and then we can set up a password. So if, for example, we are trying to connect to a third-party application and there's no option for Windows authentication, then we can use the system administrator account to log into our SQL instance. The username for this is always defaulted to SA, which is same thing as system administrator. So we need to now set our password. Let's do that now. And then confirm password. So the other important stuff we need to do again is click on add current user. Most of the time, if you don't add that, then everybody has to log in with their SA account, which is the system administrator account. But by adding current user, so people can also log in using their Windows account. So click on next. So right now, this is just details of everything we have selected so far and the things that will be installed on our system. So we have our instance configuration, the name of our instance, the instance ID, and a whole lot of stuff that we have selected. Click on install. So as we can see now, our installation is complete, and every features we selected, the full text and semantic extraction for search, the AI service, and the database engine services, everything has been installed for us, and that is done, that is completed. We can just close this dialog box, and once we close that, we would see that we are back to our SQL Server installation center. So the instance of SQL Server we have just installed right now, for us to be able to access it, there's something called SQL Server Management Studio, which is the UI for us to be able to interact with our instance, the SQL Server instance that we created. So to do that, we need to install it. So just click on this, install SQL Server Management Studio. And once you click on that, it will take you to this website in particular. So you can click on this top right hand corner to download the SSMS installer, or just click on download SQL Server Management Studio 2022 installer. So if you click on this, then we have something that has been downloaded for us. So open the file and we'll get what we call Visual Studio installer. For the latest edition, we do the downloading from Visual Studio installer. Just click on continue. So the first thing is that it's going to first download the Visual Studio installer for us, and once that is downloaded, it is from that Visual Studio installer that we'll be able to then download our SQL Server Management Studio 2022. So once we are on this page right now, it is about to download the SQL Server Management Studio 2022, or it's about to install the SQL Server Management Studio 2022 for us, and we need to choose what to install as part of the SQL Server Management Studio 2022. It is okay to select everything, but sometimes depending on what you need. So the best thing, if you don't need all the services, so for you to be able to use SQL Server Management Studio 2022, you have to select this business intelligence. That is the first thing. So by selecting this business intelligence, it will allow you to connect to other things like the SQL Server analysis, the SQL Server integration services, the SQL Server reporting services. So for you that you are just installing afresh, you might not need all these options, and that is why it is optional. But for you that have been using SQL Server Management Studio and you have something that has to do with integration services, it is important you select all this stuff, because if you don't do that, you won't be able to have the option to connect to integration services. Right now, Microsoft has been trying to incorporate AI into all of their products. For the new SQL Server Management Studio and the SQL Server 2025, there's options to connect to AI services. So there's Copilot in it. So if you don't tick this AI assistance, you won't have access to that Copilot. So it is important to click this AI assistance, and then you see that under this, it is saying included GitHub Copilot, and also hybrid and migration. So this is also important. So in case you want to migrate other database assets, and also code to, this is also important. So these code tools give us options to version control. So all the SQL code we are writing, we will now be able to version control them. And also there's query int recommendation tool, which is still in preview. So if you have used Microsoft VS Code, so you know that this is also part of it. So it will auto-complete the code you write and everything like that. So also untick this app viewer. So it's also important. And right now at the bottom here, just click on install, and you will be given the status of the installation. So once our installation is ready, so we just click on OK, and there's option for us in our Visual Studio installer to come back and modify this installation, or we can launch, and there's more. So if we want to repair on install, import, configuration, export, and maybe update settings and everything like that. So you can also read the release note and everything. Usually I would like us to go through this option here and search for SQL Server Management Studio. So once we click on that, just click on this, and this is our SQL Server Management Studio. So this will give us access to the front end of the SQL Server installation that we did already. So right now you can either create an account, sign in with your GitHub, or sign in with your Microsoft, or you can skip this add accounts and you can add the account later. So all these are their own advantage. So like I said, they are incorporating AI into this SQL Server Management Studio. So if you sign in with GitHub, you'll be able to have access to the AI feature in it. But right now, let's click on skip and add account later. So, and this is our management studio. So we have this first dialog box, which is the connection property. So it's going to ask us what server do we want to connect to, the server name we want to connect to. Right now you can use the connection property, or you can use the connection string, so anyone you want. But for now, the best one for us to use is the connection property. So the server name that we want to connect to, if you remember, the server name that we created is Yusuf 2026. So depending on the name you give yours, so supply the server name, and then is asking for the authentication mode. So right now there's window authentication, which is defaulting to my account, which is the username, and the password will not be supplied because it will try to use the Windows authentication password. Right now, the database name, so there's no database existing in this right now. I've not created any database in the server, so we just leave it as default. So the encrypt, if you select mandatory, then tick this trust server certificate. It's usually for security purpose, and if you don't want to do that, you can change it to optional and untick this, or tick server security server certificate, depending on the ones you like. If I click on connect right now, it will take us to this SQL Server instance, which the server name is Yusuf 2026. So for the first time connecting, it can take some time, and also if there's anything wrong, maybe in your username and password, then you're going to get. So right now, it's telling me a network related or instance error occurred while establishing a connection. So nothing is found. So verify the instance name is correct. Right now, it's telling me to verify that the instance name is correct. So that is correct, but another thing again is that you need to add your computer name at the beginning and try the backward slash. Let's change this to mandatory and click on trust server certificate, connect again, and that actually works instantly. So most of the time, if you try your instance name directly and it did not work, so ensure that your computer name start first, backward slash followed by your instance name. So this is my SQL Server instance name, and this is where the database is going to be. And sometimes there's some system database, which is a master, model, MSDB, and tempdb. So if I've added any database to this now, it will also be listed under this database, which nothing is there for now. And this is also the SQL Server agent that was selected at the beginning. And also there are other folder for security, replication, and integration services catalog. So that is how to log into our instance. So the other one again is that if I disconnect this, let me disconnect this and try to connect again. So I can change the authentication to SQL Server authentication. So there are a lot of authentication. There's Microsoft Entrant password. So if you are connecting to maybe something from maybe Microsoft Fabric or Azure database, so we'll click on SQL Server authentication. So it's going to ask us for username. So the username is just going to be SA, which stands for system administrator, the one we set up initially, and then click on supply our password. So let me put my password. So if everything is correct, then it should connect. And again, you can tick this remember password so that you don't need to supply your password every time you want to connect using this SA. It's still the same settings for mandatory trust server certificate. So let's click on connect. So we still get back to the same thing. So you could decide to log in with your Windows authentication or the SQL Server administrator, the system administrator, and you get the details of whatever you have used to log in. At the end of this, you can see that it has SA. So if I disconnect and try to connect again using Windows authentication and do connect, you see now that at the end, it has my name. So you can see at the end, it has my name. So this is showing that I connected using Windows authentication. That is how to install SQL Server Management Studio and log into the instance that we created while installing SQL Server. And at the right hand side, you can see now that there's option for GitHub Copilot chat. So for people that were using 2022 or SQL Server Management Studio 20.2 or 19 point something version, so there was no GitHub Copilot available for that. So to use this, you need to connect to GitHub. So there's option to sign in here. So it's either you sign in with GitHub or you sign in with your work account to be able to use this Copilot. So, and also at the top here, there's this option for Git, which is for versioning. So you can clone a repo, you can create a Git repository or a local repository. So this will allow you to version your script, and also you can then, collaborate together on scripts. So somebody could be working on a particular part of a script and you also could be working on another part, and then you push to a Git repository, and then you can merge and do whatever versioning you want to do. So that is for SQL Server installation and the SQL Server Management Studio installation. Thank you.